energy side that I'm talking about being basically a suicide pact, this net zero thing. And the whole idea that we can end the use of fossil fuels without increasing nuclear energy, because the same people who are against all fossil fuel use are also against all nuclear energy. And that is the only technology that can actually replace fossil fuels as a reliable source 24/7. We could replace 50% of the fossil fuels in the next 30 years or 40 years with nuclear energy with no difficulty at all. But the idea that wind and solar are going to replace fossil fuels or nuclear or hydroelectric is absolutely insane. Can I just explain a little bit? When you have wind and solar, you have at most 1/3 of the time can you produce reliable energy. The sun goes down all night, it's no good early in the morning or the afternoon, and then the clouds come, right? So solar energy is more like 20% capacity. So 80% of the time it can't serve the grid, which is a demand for energy at certain times a day, a certain amount. The same with wind. The wind stops at night, the wind stops in the summer, the wind stops in the winter, the wind stops for 2 weeks at a time. The wind stops when the propellers freeze up, the wind stops when the wind blows too fast because they have to tether the blades. And so if you're going to use batteries instead of gas or coal or nuclear to back up the wind and solar, you have to build 3 times as much capacity in production. In other words, if you need 100 megawatts of coal energy, you need 300 megawatts capacity of wind and solar energy to charge the batteries, because you can't charge the batteries when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. But at the same time as you're charging the batteries, you have to be supplying the grid with the full amount of energy that it needs. So there's no technical feasibility study on this. There's no economic feasibility study on this. In terms of cement, the wind industry uses more than 100 times as much cement per unit of power produced as gas does.
Hebben wij gigantisch veel producten nodig, gigantisch veel materiaal nodig. Windmolens die gebouwd worden op zee, die hebben tonnen staal nodig, die hebben hoogwaardige smeerolie nodig. En dus voor die energietransitie hebben wij nood aan miljoenen tonnen materiaal en producten.
100 times more cement. So the amount of fossil fuels that are required to build the wind and solar infrastructure makes wind and solar a parasite on the larger economy. That is a fair metaphor, a parasite. In other words, it's sucking wealth out of the system in order to support this stupid idea that wind and solar are renewable. Yes, the sun is renewable and the wind is renewable, but the infrastructure is not. The stuff they build isn't made out of plants. It's made out of steel and concrete and cadmium and aluminum and glass and lithium and cobalt and all these things. And if you look at the amount of material that has to go into a wind turbine compared to a gas plant, it's phenomenal. It means they have to mine vast amounts of ore and truck all this stuff everywhere. Huge machinery to put these things up and build them. So I've said that all the wind and solar infrastructure, onshore and offshore, should have to be built with wind and solar energy. In other words, they should not be allowed to use fossil fuels or nuclear or hydroelectric power to build the wind and solar infrastructure and then see how fast it disappears. It would be wiped off the face of the earth, and goodly so, because it is a parasite.
What's going on? So how do we get to this situation? Like, why do we need so much stuff, and how can we need so many hundreds and sometimes thousands of years of production? So here is all metal ores mined, and you can still see most of it is iron ore in terms of mass. Inside this yellow square, we've got other metals like aluminium, manganese, chromium, and copper and zinc. And inside that little black square in the top right-hand corner is our technology metals. Right. Most of our system so far, for the last 150 years, has been mined with basically steel and your basic metals like manganese and aluminium with the assistance of fossil fuels. Minerals are the new oil now, so we actually want the future to come out of this black square in the top right-hand corner. So we want the volumes at an unprecedented level that was developed in this brown and yellow squares to come out of the little black square. So this is the level of expansion that is required. Now, the nature of the minerals required for these technology metals, they're not found in bulk quantities like iron and copper. And that is the source of the problem of this difference in quantity.